Okay, greetings, brethren. Thank you for joining us again for another edition of Shepherd's Voice magazine on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. If you're on the premiere, great. Please be interactive if you can. If at another date, that's fine too. So, again, at any time you join us, God bless you, and we hope I hope, personally, this message will be of benefit to you, because we're going to do a little change up here, apart from the usual discussions that we've been having lately. But, I just wanted to start it out that way. A couple of items. As you know, Shepherd's Voice supports the Kenyan ministry, Kenyan Hands of Hope ministry. We've published about them in the Shepherd's Voice magazine physically. It's done a lot of benefit that way. Bill Goff has been there. He's been actually gone to Kenya because we know that there's a lot of unscrupulous people there that try to get money out of the United States, claiming that they're doing the work, but they're not. But he's been there, boots on the ground. And he sent out a message on November 11th here, and he says, we hope all of you are doing well. As many of you know, the schools of Kenya are closed until January, and currently our funds are totally depleted. If you could possibly help, it would be much appreciated. And I'll put the link down below. And so we donate to them regularly, and I know Bill Goff. I've spoken to him a number of times. And so I just want to remind everybody of that. Obviously you have your own charitable donations that you do, but I think these people are the brethren, and we need to be very cognizant of that. So I just encourage you to do that. I'll put his phone number there and his website. Feel free to call him up. He's been there. He goes there and he spends time there, and I appreciate that a lot about him. And so, yes, I just want to say hello to a few people. There's a number of people I haven't talked to in a while. My brethren up in Winnipeg. I was up there a few weeks ago, and we're going to hopefully get together on December 28th for a Sabbath meeting to just gather together and for fellowship and scriptural discussion. We want to do that, and of course, all the brethren in Calgary up there, and Alberta and British Columbia and Penticton, Robin and Ronald Rich down south. I just want to say hello. I saw your email the other day. I just haven't got time to get back to you. Things have been very busy outside of all that. So God bless all of you. You all mean a lot to me, and I've been able to put a message together today that is going to be a little bit different, a little bit on the lighter side. I wanted to do it that way because we're going to talk about the creation narrative here in the book of Genesis, chapter 1. And I think it's going to be in two parts. And there's some things in here that I'm going to talk about that probably, and I never really thought of, that I think will be more helpful and enlightening for us if we just candidly talk about them. Like, why talk about something that is past and settled? Like, why we need to talk about the current issues and what's going to happen in the future? We should be concentrating on that, but God doesn't work that way. His plan is tied to the past and to the future. We need to kind of grasp a hold of these kinds of things and not just say, well, that was in the past. Because in my learning of God's plan and experiencing God in my life, reading and discussing scriptures, what God does matters. And it matters all the time. That's my thinking. And what was past ties to the present. And there's a whole study out there about the book of Genesis that the book of that ties the book of Revelation to Genesis. They say if you want to understand Revelation, you got to understand Genesis. That's not where we're going here today. We're not going to go into all that, but I think there's some things here that are going to be helpful in realizing what was happening here and we're going to go into some of these, some detail. Maybe it's going to be 2 or 3 parts, because there's probably a few unanswered questions that are going to come up onto this. So we are tied as a people, as human beings, as nature, as the world. We're tied to the past and tied to the future. And I've talked about that before. It's a kind of a reality I cannot explain. And that's okay. I'm not here to explain our existence. But it is a reality I can't explain. It's, you know what? God is in control, and He will resolve all this for us. But He's in control, and if there's any tension there, don't worry about it. He's got it under control. If I say tension, there's a sort of a tautness, not like a bad thing. It's sort of like there's a connection there, a solid connection, like the string is tight, and there's not a lot of slack there. It's just tying the past with the present and the future, and we're along that timeline. But we just can't just drop off and revisit it again. We're part of this whole timeline. And it begins here in Genesis. So what I'm going to try to do here is perhaps have, a bit of fun. A little change up here. And the things we're going to go to, I can assure you, that will be slightly new to you. Because in preparing this and studying for it, I have found there's things that are new to me. And I like things that are new. Not the same old rote stuff, just telling me the same thing. There's some newness here for us to discover. I hope that you will agree with me. All right, let's go. And where are we going to go? And I'm going to already take a drink of water because I'm already feeling something, coughs coming. I've had a lot of this lately. Okay. Verse 1 of Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. All right. Already we're going to stop and talk about this. The word created here, God created, is bahra. Bahra. I'm not good at those pronunciations sometimes, bahra. But it implies, according to the Hebrew scholars, nothing pre-existed. Throughout the Old Testament, it's used only of God, for He is the only being who can bring something from nothing into existence. So again, He is the only being who can bring something from nothing into existence. For me, the Big Bang Theory aligns with this verse. Now, for some reason, I know there's some that just oppose, and in Christian circles oppose the Big Bang Theory. I'm not sure why, but everything seems to align that. Genesis 1:1 seems to align with that completely. What here we have here in the beginning, time. There's a time. That's a time statement. God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. All in one verse. The Big Bang Theory, this is called the Big Bang Theory, says and teaches, in theory, that time, space, and mass came into existence at once. It had to be at once. Mass, if you would have mass or earth or anything, this Bible or this piece of paper or this desk or me, had to come at the same time, and it had to find a space to be put. So if you created mass, well, where would you put it? Time, when would you put it? These had to happen at the same time. And we know time had to have a beginning according to general relativity. Einstein's theory of general relativity. We also know that time and space and matter relate to one another. Time and space and matter are not inseparable. Black holes. Time comes to an end. Space is bent. Time slows down. The whole theory goes into this. And it's been shown and demonstrated in real life that time and space and matter are all related. They came into existence at one moment. And that's why I look at this and say, in the beginning God created, in the beginning time created the heavens and the earth. It's almost very poetic. He didn't say God in the beginning decided to think of things, and then he decided to create mass, and then he started to create space. No. It all happened at one time. And that's why I believe in the Big Bang Theory. I used to, as a young person, thought that there was a singularity that exploded into a space that already existed. That's not true. There was no space. There was no time. There was no matter. But the singularity created all that when it expanded. And there's arguments about just how that expansion happened. And that's far beyond the scope of this discussion. But it all seems to align. It all seems to make sense to me, as somebody who is particularly intuitive, to try to understand the reality of the universe. But the Big Bang Theory, to me, makes total sense in light of Scripture. I don't know how to get around that. If you have a different opinion, that's okay. That's okay. We're not here to solve the past, but we're here to kind of maybe understand how we've gotten here. But there is a theory, too, that nothing is unstable. When nothing is unstable, in the beginning there was like nothing, but that's unstable, and God made something that's unstable and created all this. And it all seems to make sense from at least this technical point of view. So we have this scripture. And we know time had a beginning according to general relativity. And they all related to one another. We just can't get away from that. So I hope that kind of helps a little bit, or it doesn't create any consternation. Now, verse 2. Here's where things start to get going. The earth was without form and void, and the darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Let's talk about this. Verse 2. So this is, if you've been around the Church of God circles for some time, the formless, without form and void and darkness. Oof. So it doesn't sound like a very hospitable situation. But it says tohu and bohu, I think is the expressions that have been used. Tohu being formless, confusion, chaos, nothingness, and disorder. And bohu, empty, void, and waste. And they usually come together. And then going on from verse 3, this disorder, this confusion, starts to be resolved when God said, "Let there be light." So God starts to turn that around. So let's talk about what is called, and one of the names is called the gap theory. The gap between verses 1 and 2. The great gap theory. All right. And that, I'm going to kind of condense it here. I didn't try to read up more on it. I've known about it for years. I've seen it talked about. The gap theory is that the world was not, the earth here, was not originally in this situation of confusion, of uselessness, nothingness and disorder, void and waste. It was not originally in that condition, but God created it beautifully, and there was some form of angelic rebellion that resulted in its destruction, that turned it into this condition where it was darkness, without form, and void. A war, and maybe even what we would call a terrorist act, Satan's rebellion and his angels. To me, there's a lot of sense in this, and I'll explain why. And again, don't worry too much about this in the sense, and I'll explain why. Evil mindsets usually, if they don't get what they want, if they don't get the respect they deserve, or if they've been crossed, they go on what is called a scorched earth policy or scorched earth attitude. And I remember watching this, say, back, I don't know if it was, it was in the early 90s. Saddam Hussein, he invaded Kuwait, took over everything, and the American administration, the Bush administration, decided that that wasn't going to be acceptable, along with an alliance, decided to drive him out of there, out of Kuwait. And in doing so, they decided they were going to lose and be driven out. So what did? They lit the oil wells on fire. Just let them run and burn. Countless pollution. Just destroying all these, just setting these oil fields on fire. I can't have it, so therefore I'm going to just destroy it. And I watched that and I said, this looks too familiar to me. Saddam Hussein and so many others who behave this way, who decide that they want nothing more to do with somebody who crossed them or they don't get their way, go on these campaigns. Saddam Hussein, so many others, on those destructive campaigns, they did not get that, as my grandmother would say, from licking the grass. In other words, they inherited it somehow, and this is what was going on. I can't have it, therefore I'll waste it. And that's basically the background behind the gap theory. There's basically a rebellion behind this that turned the world into a place as described here in verse 2. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about this before. But I couldn't go through this without talking about it because it's kind of a discussion that's been going on for decades within the Church of God circles that I've known it. So I just want to bring it up. I don't want to just skip it over and say there was nothing there, but I want to make a couple of comments about this. So the main point in the argument for the argument of the gap theory was the term was in here. And the earth was. And the earth was without form. And if any of you, say, have the Companion Bible or Bullinger's Companion Bible, and I think Bullinger is a very astute theologian. I don't agree with everything he has written because he's a dispensationalist of a different type. But the term should be translated became, and the earth became somehow. And it doesn't say why. Now before I go on to that a little bit, I did go on to a website called Bible Hub. And there's like a parallel, you can go onto the parallel page where you can go and see every translation just kind of lists right through of a particular verse. So I look at verse 2, and every single translation uses the term was. There is not one exception. And that does say something. But I'm a little suspicious. So I looked up the term, this term, was. I wanted to look it up and find out a little bit more about it. Again, we're just this is a light discussion. Again, I don't want us to think that this is a serious discussion and we need to agree on this. But that's okay. Now, I want to get to a point here. But I want to go through some detail just to kind of get through these pages. Now the Hebrew verb, this is the Berean Strong's Lexicon. It says here the Hebrew verb haya, or heya, maybe that's better, more, as translated here, is a fundamental term in the Old Testament, often translated to be, quote unquote, to be, or quote unquote, to become. It conveys the idea of existence, occurrence, or coming into being. This verb is pivotal in expressing the states of being and the unfolding events. So this term is a verb. And was in the English language is a verb. Okay, and was is used by definition, was in English is used to express an action done in the past. So that's interesting to me, and so it makes me kind of think. If you go to Genesis 1:3, the same word is translated, let there be light. And verse 5, Genesis, and there was. Something preceded it, let there be. In verse 6, and verse 7, and it was so. And there was. So something happened prior. The implication, there's always something that happened prior. There seems to be something that happened prior. Nothing happened prior to anything in verse 1, other than God pre-existed it all. So the question needs to be asked, if this happened, if this angelic rebellion occurred and wrecked everything to such an extent that there was nothing but darkness on the earth, and it was outformed, just a wreck, like a total waste, without any, it's empty, void and waste, it's by that property. It was basically rendered worthless. Why doesn't the question needs to be asked, and this is the one I'm going to ask. Hopefully this kind of turns our discussion in the right direction. Why doesn't the creation account mention it? Why not mention and discuss the angelic rebellion? Why doesn't it spend a few chapters of what went down so badly? God did this. He had all these angels, and they had this. They had this great earth, and then everything went wrong. There was this whole mess, just a complete and total mess that came down with attitudes and the things that just lighting up oil wells or whatever it is. Why get into all these discussions? Nobody wants to get into that. Why not explain it all so we understand and not have to speculate? Well, I want to talk about that. I believe strongly in progressive revelation. Progressive revelation. It's for our sake. So think about it. If a narrative over an angelic rebellion was given prior to the seventh day creation here, bringing things from disorder to order, if that creation would never followed all of that, what God started to do here in verse 3, if that had to be all laid out first, that would be very problematic. It would be a total distraction. It would not serve what God was trying to communicate to us, those of us who have come after the fact. It would take away what he wants us to know and what matters to him and what matters to us. Because what matters to us, we have verse 1 and then verse 3, we have what matters to us. Life on earth as it exists today. I think you would agree. Who wants to hear about all the sad sap stories and all the past? I don't know if that's the right way of putting it. What I have realized is that the Bible is very quiet or very quiet about some things or some ones or some people. When it's that way, or certain functions, it's for a reason. Because this rebellion doesn't matter. So my personal feeling is that this occurred. My personal feeling is this occurred. This rebellion. And maybe in part 2 I'll explain a little bit why. But if you disagree, don't put the walls up. Don't put a hedge around anything I'm saying. This is something I personally feel that that's the case, giving the weight of evidence. Yet, please do not think that it has anything further to do with what I'm going to be talking about here. There's one more mention of it. It's going to come up. But if you feel differently, that's perfectly fine. There's a lot more here, a lot more blessing that we can get into here that really matters. Because what matters is what's coming. So I think I needed to deal with the elephant in the room. I had to tell you where my position is. This is the thing this is my looking into it. It seems to point that direction, but that's okay. There's pointing to Isaiah somewhere that God did not create the world in tohu and bohu as part of an evidence there. And some have used even that the angels looked for dry places because they couldn't stand the water anymore for eons. It was just covered with water, and then they were all cast down on the earth and was just covered with water, and they got to resent the water, and the demon was cast out. It would look for dry places according to Jesus Christ. So it's just like on, and I'm not interested in going there. But these are the things that have come up. Now, let's talk about something here that I hope, as we move along, will be of more specific interest. Verse 2, and so we're going to read this again. In verse 2, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now, if something subtle has occurred here, if you didn't catch it, what has changed? There's just a lot of compact things in here. It's almost poetic. The Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. It was just waters. It's something very subtle, and we almost all miss it. And I had it flagged up to me some time ago, and I know that it was important. And this is what I want to express here. There is a shift in verse 2 in perspective because of where the Spirit of God is. The Spirit of God is not in the heavenly realms here. It's in this place of darkness and tohu and bohu that the Spirit of God came. There is a shift in perspective. If we're not paying attention, if we're not careful enough, we'll miss it. It goes from the view, say, from the cosmos or from the heavens to the view or perspective as the viewer on earth, inside the darkness. And the narrative after this is based on that. It's not a creator outside of the earth. It's a creator that is with the earth. And that is the fundamental. If anything you can get out of this message, that would be it. The creator is here, and he's on the earth. He's in the darkness that was there, the face of the deep, over the waters, in a messed up situation of things where no life could possibly be, and just not a good situation, but he's there. So going forward, what happens going forward from here and from verse 3 on? It's about order, bringing things into order. Things were out of order. There was no order. It was messed up. There's no distinctions. There's just nothing, void and empty, and just, I don't know how all these words make sense. But God starts to make order and distinctions beyond starting here on the first day. And the Torah makes distinctions between day and night, light and dark, land and water, male and female, good and evil. All these things, God starts to make distinctions to bring order and separate things that need to be separated. This is what he starts to do. And where does he do it? From the perspective and the place where he is at, above the waters. He is there. He's not calling the shots from someplace out in the cosmos. So everything described here in these other verses here are based on where he is and is on the earth. He's not calling the shots from the heavens. And that's what helps make all this creation narrative, helps us make more sense of it. All right. I hope I've emphasized that clearly enough. So in verse 3, first day, light. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, and that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. All right. When he said, "Let there be light," he didn't create light. There was already light. But he didn't create it. There is nothing in this verse here, in the Hebrew. The word create, as I mentioned earlier, if I can just go back here briefly, if I can find it here, Bahra, there's nothing in here that where it says he created. He just said he made light. Let there be light. The word create there, created light, is not there. And again, to the perspective of the Spirit of God from earth, this earth was covered with this impervious, opaque, cosmological dust or debris or moisture, that where light could not penetrate or was very little. He said, "Let there be light." There's no creation of light here. No creation of light. And he said, "Let there be light." And guess what happened? So this, "Let there be light," is a command for the atmosphere or whatever it was that was surrounding the planet, to clear sufficiently enough so that light from the sun could start to get through. We'll talk about the sun, our star here, in a minute. That's on day 4 when that sun starts to come into play. But it was sufficiently cleared so that light would start to come through. Seems like a good start. The sun isn't being created here. The sun was already there. The heavens and the earth. This has all been created. It's a command for the atmosphere to clear and lighten up, and whatever is going on, atmosphere or whatever is going on in the stratosphere or whatever was going on at the time, to start clearing out so that get a little bit of sunshine in there. Not direct sunshine. There's still clouds. There's still all this. He just said, We've got to lighten the situation up here. You cannot still see the sun or the moon. He says, let there be light. And it says here, and God saw it was good. The first sense of optimism that has come along here. And for us, it gives us a sense of optimism too in life. He's always been, from the beginning, he's the light of the world. Let there be light. I am the light of the world. Let there be light. When Christ came, it was a sense for us, in a darkened, fallen world. He says, I am the light of the world. Let there be light, and this is what he's done. In another deep sense. So when God saw it was good, God was taking pleasure in what was happening. There's no bitterness here. There's nothing expressed. There's no bitterness expressed over what may have happened or what he's started with. He's not talking about that. Why talk about bitterness? We don't need that. Because this has been written for us, and he's doing things here for us. Of course, he's doing it for himself, as I talked about many times, as well as Darren Connery. He's doing this for himself. By doing it for himself, he's doing it for life here on earth. He was taking pleasure in what was happening. And it says here, okay, God saw the light, and it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. Here he was making a distinction between darkness and light. And it could be noted that, we'll leave it at that. God saw the light, and it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the night day, and the darkness he called night. And so the evening and the morning were the first day. All right, so there is the distinction there between night and day. All right, let's go to verse 6. And God said, let the firmament, now that's the new King James, or the King James translation. I'm sure you can check the other words, or the expanse, the firmament. It's out there. He's not talking about the universe, because this is in perspective what's on the earth here. And we'll kind of try to highlight that again in a little bit. And God said, let the firmament, or the expanse, and this word is very seldom, or just the only time this has ever been used in Scripture, this Hebrew word, in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, or the expanse, and divided the waters for which there were under the firmament, the waters for which were the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And this is heaven in the New King James, but it's not the heaven where not the heavenly places, but sky should be counseled. And he called the expanse sky. Maybe some other translations. And evening and morning were the second day. Again, separations and distinctions that are starting to occur. Bringing order into this tohu bohu, this disorder, starts to bring order into play. So this separation, the waters from the ground and the waters from the earth, I'm not a meteorologist, but we'll certainly understand this better. But what he's doing is creating some kind of pressure gradient that is starting to occur to make life available, possible, temperature changes, making order so that life is possible. Life needs to exist in a state of order. So he's doing this on the second day. He's still continuing on this process right to the seventh day. So on the third day, let's continue on. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and gathering together of the waters, called he them seas. And God saw that it was good. Again, he's being, he's taking pleasure in what's happening. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, an herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, an herb yielding seed after its kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was itself after this kind. And God saw it was good. And the evening and the morning were of the third day. Now the question would come, is like the sun has not become visible, but there is light. How could you have life appearing here as it's been described, the seeds and the trees coming, if there's no sun visible? Well, that's, again, till this time an observer could only see the sun, or perhaps even could not see the sun, or even the heat of it at the time. But who knows? It's hard to describe maybe what the situation that was going on here. But the life rays of the sun, even on a very cloudy day, anywhere get through, creating conditions where life can prosper. Photosynthesis can happen. So you don't need the presence of a sun shining down on the earth in order to allow life to begin. He said, let there be light. He created sufficient life for that vegetation could start to generate. My question in this, though, I don't have a specific answer for you, and maybe I'll think about it again in 2 weeks when I go back and continue the rest of this. And I don't know if I'm going to say I have an answer because I wasn't there, but I know the Spirit of God was, and I trust that. My question is, the earth started to yield life. The ground. It is like life was already in the earth. There were seeds there already, and was now given a chance to come forth or to return. And when I say to return, that might fall into those of the gap theory camp. They've seen that would make sense for that if you lean towards the gap theory. Seeds from plants tend to hold a promise. It's hard to destroy them. They are there and they have a carry. I remember reading a book years ago that these seeds hold a promise until they hit moisture or in the right environment, then they'll come back and start growing even after decades or hundreds of years. But it's a curious thing to me because he says, of all the things here, and I'm just going to throw this out here for fun. I mean, I'm not here to tell you all the answers if I was like a witness to creation. But he just, of all the times, he says he didn't create life. And I believe he had created life, but the term Baha, or Bahra, I think the term is here, Bahra, doesn't come in the scripture. And God created life, and all these things happened. But he just said, let there be. The waters, place, let the earth bring forth grass. I don't believe there's a creation term in there. It's a wonderment of mine. It's a wonderment of mine. And it goes into the dinosaurs and something that seems to be missing. And it all gets even more obfuscated when you start thinking about the great flood of Noah's time. We're not here to solve all that. I'm just trying to get us here to appreciate God's bringing order from disorder and and distinctions, all coming from the perspective of him being here on the earth. He's not doing it by remote control. as we have, especially nowadays with phones. You can control this and do this. He is there real time. That's the emphasis I want to get across. And I hope that sinks, or that resonates well with you. Now the fourth day, the sun, the moon, the stars. Oh, let's go talk about that. Question came up in a Bible study, a young man, and he asked, he was confused about how can there let there be light, but then later on, he creates the sun, the moon, and the stars. So I wrote him, I said, I could share you some information on this, and so that's what kind of triggered me maybe having to talk about this, but he's not creating the sun. He's not creating the sun or the moon. Those are existing out there already. The heavens, that's all in verse 1. That's all in verse 1. And now we're in this perspective here. So let's read that scripture. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day, or like the expanse, and to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, made, not created. Okay, and we'll get to that in a second again. If I'm not, hopefully I'm not confusing you. The greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night. And to divide, there's that distinction, from the light from the darkness. And God saw it was good, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Now let there be, again, he does not create the moon and the sun here. They started to come in appearance, again, from the perspective of the earth. The things started to clear out more and more as he progressively brings things into order and uses these, they call them heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, for example, for his purpose and for man, from the perspective of the earth. And again here, the word here for lights is not the same word for light on day one. When it says, let there be light, it's not the same word. It's not the same word for light. Here it means bodies that give light. And God made these lights appear. These bodies that give light. He's not talking about the fact that there is light on the earth that maybe have come from those bodies, from the moon, and particularly, especially the sun. So there's this understanding here that we need to have that I hope hopefully clears up maybe some confusion. A lot of it we've ignored for years. And the stars are not made either. They just become visible in the expanse. The same word as before. The expanse is how we actually see them. We see them coming from us, and we see them in the atmosphere. It's really what the same. It's sort of the same thing. It's our perspective. Now the moon, from our perspective, is the same size as the sun. Anyone at the time looking down there and going, okay, this is great. There's some water going on. Oh, that moon, or that thing that rules the night up there, it appears to have a face on it. Anyway, man on the moon and the sun, well, they look the same size. Pretty cool. But they're not. But it's what our perspective is as we see that in our expanse. We know that's not the case, but the moon are not the same size. The sun is 400 times farther away from us than the moon, and the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun. But the sun is 400 times larger than the moon. And that's what we're getting at here. And that is a significant point. When we have a total solar eclipse, it's a very significant event because the moon, because of its perfect relative size to us on Earth, compare it to the sun, blocks out the sun completely and you get that aurora. My brother-in-law has taken a number of pictures of that, and we put this in Shepherd's Voice magazine too. A significant event if you can get clear skies, because a lot of discoveries have been made, and the general theory of relativity has been shown to be true. God set it up this way for us to discover aspects of the universe. General relativity, I believe 100%, because a lot of things, especially what this phone is doing right here, is all based on satellites and things like that, who take into account the time dilation because they're going on a different speed. But God put it that way so that we can make those discoveries. It's intentional. And the chances of it being having by chance, there's no chance at all. I don't understand atheism. I really don't. Maybe we'll talk about that sometime. And they were made visible. Why? For the reasons explained here. They were visible for man. And why were they doing that? So that we can discern two lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made them the stars also to become visible. God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw it was good. And the evening of the fourth morning of the fourth day, and let them be for light in the firmament of heavens to give light upon the earth. And we're just going back to verse 14. Let their lights in the firmament of the heavens divide the day from the night, and let them be signs for you and I, for the seasons and for the days and years. He did it for us. Of course he has us in mind. And that hasn't changed. They made them visible. He made them visible for us. Visible for our blessing and benefit. So, brethren, there's a few days left, 5, 6, and 7. And so I think at this point I am going to kind of stop here and let us ponder and think about that, hoping for some feedback before I go further. The question will be, well, do you believe in a young earth or an old earth and things like that? And what I believe is no impact on anything particularly. But if you were asking me now, I believe in an old earth. I don't believe creation happened in 6 days like that. There's reasons for that, and it's not really, it doesn't really matter. It's because what is being told here is what matters for us to understand. The things that are not explained or not go into detail is because God says you don't need to know them. And I believe in that progressive revelation. We'll know things in the future at some point, and that's okay. And I look forward to that. But there's so many other things here that's going on. So, brethren, I hope these few first few days, 4 days here, or in discussion of the earliest, are a blessing to you and give you something to think about and talk about. I look forward to hearing any backlash or encouragement. That's okay. So in the meantime here, it's the Sabbath, and Kim's cooking some dinner, and I did all the prep work, by the way. But we're going to take it easy going forward. God bless all of you. Share with a friend, share with an enemy, and we'll see you here next time on Shepherd's Voice magazine. Till then, take care.